We really need to you really need to control your emotions, okay? Um One thing I came to realize is that most of us think that we roam the world, we move out here with our logical self, like everything is logical and all of that. But apparently, that's not the case. Actually, our emotional self usually plays a huge part in us making our decisions. In short, our emotions usually play a huge part in us making decisions. We usually walk around based on our emotions, guys. We are not rational creatures, we are irrational. Irrationality is subconscious. It exists in our subconscious mind. It's so deep in building us. Because everything everything has a spectrum, okay? Good, bad, light, darkness, you know. Same applies for rational and being irrational. One thing we usually our emotions usually veer us towards options or solutions that suit our ego and make us feel good. Okay. And emotions play a huge part in making this possible. And laws of human nature, as we are, our basic instinct is survival. But emotion drives us into doing these kind of things. And I think it's not healthy to be irrational out here. Like you're just roaming around, venting. Like there's one thing that when irrationality plays a huge part in us, okay, right? There's usually the lower grade irrationality, the just the usual moods swings we have on a daily basis, that which are subconscious. And then there's the high grade irrationality, okay? This is where you are those moods that you have get amplified, okay? They usually get amplified. And then get amplified, they usually turn into something different, okay, like envy, right? When envy gets amplified, it becomes what? Anger, right? It becomes resentment, it becomes discomfort, it becomes something else. I don't know, my camera is hanging. Sorry about that. But yeah, that's how irrationality is. I get this, even if you are so irrational when you're out here, there's a way for you to become rational, okay? Okay? Because for irrationality to play a huge part in our life, the actual thing here is that it's usually attached to our ego and pride. And this usually comes with biases. Okay. Like there's the confirmation bias, okay? That you believe in something so much to the point where you find proofs that actually confirm the belief you believe in. You go to that extent of trying to prove it to us that that's confirmation bias, and that's a way of rationality. You reinforce your beliefs in what you believe in. And then there's conviction bias. Okay. Conviction bias is when you hold an emotion, like you hold an emotion for way too long. You hold a belief in your emotions, and when that happens, it usually turns into what? Chaos, right? And then for rationality to play, even nowadays, you see people like, oh, people say, I never knew they were that kind of a person. How could they do this to me? It's because you guys rely on appearance bias. You don't care about who people are. You just like what they are. What you see, appearances. They call it look maxing nowadays. Looks. Guys, don't love me for what you see, man. Love me for who I am inside. Yeah. I really like coming on my camera and just speaking my mind. But you really need to get control of your irrational self. Yeah. One thing I even came to see is I blame. Blame is root of all negativity. It's the root of all negativity, guys. When you blame something, you've created a cycle of negativity there. And literally nobody actually made you angry. That's the thing here. You made yourself angry. Nobody made you angry. That was your feelings. Guys, the thing is that I think when our brain thinks, creates a thought patterns, right? And I don't think emotions and cognition are play the same place. They get interpreted in the same place, or even because these chemical reactions that invoke emotion in us, they get interpreted in some different place where thought happens. Where thought happens and emotions get interpreted is different. So how come you can say you're logic when you walk out here? And everybody is unaware of this. And remember, guys, everything starts with self-awareness. Self-awareness. Even to an extent, traumas when we were kids play a huge part in this. Like when we were kids, we were actually really vulnerable, to our parents. We'll listen to them. We will, we will want to please them. And when you don't please them, something happens. They dislike you or something. Traumas when you have kids. Traumas actually. This is it's like now when you're all grown up and you meet somebody who can actually invoke that kind of emotion inside you, bro. That's when they invoke, either it was positive or negative. You can see this when somebody is becoming childish around you. When somebody is childish around you, that's when you know this person have invoked something in them back then when they were a child, either in a negative or a positive. You know, those are kind of inflammatory factors. Called that's what I think they're called, inflammatory factors. You need to get in control with the emotions, bro. The law of rationality, or is it irrationality? I don't know. You know, but the thing is, um, even being not being able to wait a minute, someone is knocking. Sorry, guys, someone was knocking. But anyway, now even when you have sudden gains and losses in your life, you usually become irrational. You get too excited, or when something goes wrong in your life, you become angry. Look, I relive this, bro. I live this every day. Come on, we all know this. You become so angry at yourself. When get this case, when you're in this point in your life where you have certain gains and losses, just step back. Okay, just look at it from far. Don't always just jump into conclusions without even examining your own emotions first. Even at a time when you're having rising pressures in your life, stress, even at times when you're in a group setting, guys, the group is always wrong. I will say that again. I do not conform. I'm against conformity completely, completely. I'm not part of conformity, guys. And when you're in group settings, you actually need to approach things with skepticism and curiosity. Like you're like a child, but at the same time, you have the judgment of an adult. I don't know if it makes sense. You know, but I'd say you, this is a way of you looking so irrational, right? Even at times there are people in our lives who actually invoke high emotions in our lives, like our parents, our siblings, friends, anybody can be, even a contractor. These are known as inflaming individuals. When you come through these people, guys, you just need to treat people as patterns, man. Just treat them as facts. That's how they are. You cannot change them. You know, okay? But you really need to be rational, that's what I'd say. And for you to be rational, guys, you need to examine your emotions from their roots. You need to know yourself thoroughly, and everything starts from within, man. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get in control with my emotion. Because get this, usually when we get angry, bro, it's like somebody else came out when you're angry. It's like there's somebody else living in your emotional self. You need to get this thing in check, myself. You know, those are kind of strategies I'd say. And you can even go to the extent of increasing your reaction time when you have those kind of things happening in your life. When you have emotions, you need to actually increase your reaction time just to cool yourself, or even just leave that scenery, man. Go away from it. Just like what I've said about skepticism and curiosity, you need to find the balance between thinking and emotions. Right? Curiosity and skepticism. Anyways, thank you guys for watching.